Hello again. In this course, I will introduce how the COVID pandemic has changed and what we are trying to do in terms of digital transformation. And course description is as follows. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world, and its effects are predicted to last for a long time. This session presents how the post-COVID-19 era will change the world we used to know. Can we go back to the pre-COVID normal? Or will we face the whole different new world? The prospect and outlook or predictions of the global think tanks and organizations will be introduced and explained. And prospects for change in the key areas of society will be summarized in this session very briefly. Objectives of this course is to understand the post-COVID-19 society and economy predicted by the professional organizations. You can make predictions again too. And I also want you to understand the logic and the reasoning behind the various predictions and prospects. And also, I'd like you to understand the key common features of the prospect and outlook. And also, I'd like to understand how to respond to emerging changes and how to prepare for the post-COVID-19 era in anticipation or in preparation of the predicted trends here. And course structure is as follows. When we talk about post-COVID-19, can we go back to the pre-pandemic normal or new, whole different next normal? That is the topic of the first sector. And the second one is prospects or outlook for the post-COVID-19 era in economy. And third one is in education, and fourth one is healthcare. And lastly, but not least, the government. And also I'll just talk about a little bit technologies and other issues in this session. Now, let's move on to the post-COVID-19. As I mentioned earlier, can we go back to pre-pandemic situations? Meaning that, can we go back to the world we used to know? Or will we face the whole different new world? According to UN, we will change a whole new different world. They say a once-in-a-century crisis, a Great disruption unleashed by a viral coronavirus pandemic, hit the world economy in 2020 and 2021. The pandemic spread like wildfire and forest fire, reaching every corner of the world, infecting more than 100 million now, and killing close to 2 million people worldwide. So in a matter of months, the number of people living in poverty increased sharply, while income and wealth inequality disparities tended towards new highs. What's happening in your country? That's a serious problem to all of us. And governments around the world, in response to the pandemic, responded very rapidly and aggressively and boldly to stem the health and economic contagion of the crisis. In that process, fiscal and monetary stimulus packages were quickly rolled out to save the economy. The crisis responses, however, gave birth to difficult choices between saving lives and saving livelihoods, between speed of delivery and efficiency, and between short-term cost and long-term impact. And limited fiscal space and high levels of public debt constrained the ability of many countries to roll out sufficiently large stimulus packages. How about in your country? In many countries, the government is forced to provide more fiscal and monetary stimulus for the sake of their economy and society. But they are limited and constrained by fiscal and monetary pressure. And how will the COVID change our world? With the vaccination in progress in many parts of the world, the fight against the virus is still going on here. And with the end of the tunnel in sight, we should get ready to face new world caused by the pandemic. And also, we have some uncertainty ahead because there are lots of newly emerging variants of the virus like Delta something and Alpha something, so we don't know for sure what kind of variant will be coming up. So in preparation, the possible new wave of virus and pandemic, we should be very careful to get back to the one we used to know. And we must prepare to face a new, different world. Anyhow, we must recover our economy, we must recover our society. But in the process of recovery, everybody knows new technologies are playing a critical role, which will accelerate digital transformation in post-pandemic era. I stressed many times in other modules, in other sessions. The issue of digital transformation will be introduced in the following module. This session is not for COVID-19. It's not just for economy, education, government. This session is mainly focused on digital policies and digital issues, summarized as digital transformation in this session. Now, let me summarize the key features of this session into 4 areas: economy, education, health system, and government, among many. There was a shock to global supply chain, global value chain, and there was close and shutdown of businesses from social lockdown, which lead to global recession. With the raft of unemployment over the world, the global economy has been experiencing decline in consumption, unbalance within and between national economies. Much of economic activities went online and virtually, as you know, and spurring the digital industries and accelerating digital transformation. That's what's happening in our economy. Without digital transformation, very few businesses can survive. Without digital transformation, we cannot enjoy everyday life in normal society, in new society. Let's move to education. Education is a very important part of our society for the long-term growth. Without teaching our next generation, without teaching our working employee, we cannot continue to grow in the future. So we must be very cautious. We must be very careful about the good strategy about learning and work here. The virtual learning and virtual working, virtual studying, especially in education sector, has driven new tools. The shift of learning into home has blurred the lines between learning and leisure. Entertainment, education, all the game playing, they are just combined into one space here. That's why the line between learning and leisure getting blurred. During the pandemic, work is largely remote and digital, as you can experience here. And also, you are just enjoying, you are studying these materials online. This is a sort of digital learning, digital studying here. And also, this is just going with a sharply increasing use of digital collaboration tools. we can work together through digital platform, digital technologies, and digital tools over here. Also, healthcare system is very important. We don't have to mention the importance of a healthcare system because during the pandemic, the importance of a healthcare system was stressed many, many times. So after this COVID pandemic, we must prepare the possible new wave of a pandemic. So in preparation for the possible future pandemic, serious consideration should be given to this sector. Also, the government should tackle the COVID-19 in one hand, but also they must keep alive the economy, and government should achieve people's safety and people's life, economy and education, etc. The government should do something very aggressively, otherwise other sectors cannot develop itself because the government can be a roadblock or barrier to the development of other sectors. So without the change of government, other sectors cannot develop in the future. So these sectors are essential parts of the society without government, and also government should be an essential part of the society for the sake of everyday life of the people. So I will be focusing on these key areas, among many, on economy, education, healthcare, and government here. And technologies and other issues will be touched very concisely after we explained 4 major sectors of the society. Let's go to the economy, the outlook of the economy. What will be happening after we deal with this COVID-19? How will the COVID-19 pandemic be shaping the global economy? That's the subject of this session. The resulting changes in consumer behavior and the structural changes and the response of the government in terms of fiscal and monetary policies, which will likely to affect the global economy for long years to come. Nobody knows. Actually, in some countries, in a fast vaccinated countries, their economy is rebounding very fast, but nobody's so sure what's going to happen in the future because of new emerging variant and new effectiveness of vaccination. Nobody knows how long the vaccination will just take effect. So in case of new emerging virus or pandemic, we must take precautious measures to deal with future impact of economy, especially global economy, coming from possible wave of pandemic. And also, we must prepare for the possible impact of the global economy coming from this pandemic. The World Bank stresses that the importance of the coordinated and aggressive policies in response to this COVID-19 and also the future possible impact, negative impact of this pandemic. The blow of this COVID is hitting hardest in countries where the pandemic has the most severe and where there is a heavy reliance on global trade. The more you rely on the global trade, the more serious negative impact you had on your economy. Especially all the EMDS, emerging and developing economies, have vulnerabilities that are magnified or aggravated by external shocks. Moreover, interruptions in schooling and primary health care access are likely to have long-lasting impact on human capital development. We must pay attention more to human development, HRD, human resource development, because in the long run, human resource development will play a critical role in every society. That's why we must pay attention to education sector. And so, from the perspective of one company, you must act now. Then companies will have an opportunity to shape a positive future, which is predicted by many famous professional organizations. All of these economic issues are basically the ones about digital transformation. So without digital transformation, you cannot respond to the current COVID pandemic, and also you must prepare for the possible negative impact of this COVID pandemic. So, simply put, all of these issues, all of these activities, all of these negative impacts are basically issues about digital transformation. So let's focus on the perspective of digital transformation. Now, we just moved to education. As you can see, as you can observe around you, schooling and education have been disrupted by the COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all continents, which means most of the kids, most of the countries, most of the schools are affected by this COVID-19. The closure of schools and other learning spaces have been impacted more than 90%. I guess it's more than 94% of the world's student population. Up to 99% of low and lower middle-income countries are affected by this COVID-19. And in the long run, learning losses threaten to extend beyond the generation and get rid of decades of progress, not least in support of girls and young women's educational access and retention. So-called underserved people should get more chance to get access to education opportunity. So we must be very careful. We must pay more attention to the education, especially to the underserved groups like poor children, poor family, and women in many societies. That's why this issue is very important in the short term and in the long term as well. So, as an alternative to traditional schooling, we must find out the way to educate the people using lots of different tools and systems. One of them is distance learning. But distance learning can ease fiscal pressure from the COVID-19. When I say but, it should be then. Then distance learning can ease fiscal pressure from the COVID-19. But without any infrastructure, how can you just teach your children virtually or online? In many countries during the COVID-19, government spent a lot of money to support the economy, to support poor families, to support the businesses. So, as fiscal pressures increase and development assistance comes under strain, the financing of education could also face major challenges, aggravating or exacerbating massive pre-COVID-19 education funding gaps. Even before the COVID-19, there was a huge gap between have and have-nots, between regions. There is a huge gap in education. In addition to these existing gaps, the COVID-19 is highly likely to exacerbate or aggravate the massive gaps. And on the other hand, this crisis has stimulated innovation. That's a bright side of this pandemic. So, in process of overcoming this pandemic, many schools, many governments stimulated the innovation in terms of education tools, education systems like virtual learning, online learning, and other than physical traditional learning. So distance learning is one of the examples. This solution, distance learning solutions, were developed thanks to quick responses by government and department and partners all over the world for the continuity of education, including the Global Education Coalition convened by UNESCO, which is in charge of education in global scene. So what they are suggesting is COVID-19 could accelerate digital transformation in education. So you don't have to look at the specific cases. What did you do in your country when the COVID-19 just forced us to stop, go to custom, go to a store, go to school, go to government offices? What did you do, especially in education? How did you continue your schooling in your country? In many cases, I guess, they tried to use the internet, other distance learning tools. So this is the natural development of natural advancement of education in terms of innovation in education. So the children and youth affected by lack of resources or other ICT environment should be taken care of. In that process, if you provide digital distance, digital learning, digital working tools, it will be true for the teaching profession that they will have a equal and more opportunities to learn on online environment. So the government should provide infrastructures and devices and tools and services as well as support as a policymaker in education. Now I'd like to stress the importance of traditional tools other than just the high-tech digital technologies. We don't have to rely on only high-tech like AI or internet or high-speed, something like that. Without those infrastructures, you can find out another alternatives like television or radio, traditional radio, all these available materials. So you don't have to just simply focus on high-tech. You can find out alternatives of low-tech or mid-tech, easy-tech, like television and radio. That's the whole point of these recommendations by UNESCO. If you have a good 5G and other advanced technology, it's better. But even without those technologies and infrastructures, you can make use of these traditional distance learning tools and systems. That's what I'd like to stress in many points of education, especially in your country, depending on the situation of ICT and digital environment. Now let's move on to healthcare. I'll just explain this subject very simply because everybody knows what has happened and what will be happening in the future. The COVID-19 just reminded us the importance of the healthcare system in public and private sectors. So the COVID-19 or other pandemic has been the biggest challenge the health and care system faced in this country, in this history. So we don't have to go into very detail because everybody knows the importance of the health system. So what should we do? What should we do? We must go to telemedicine and distance medicine and a new system of information sharing and data sharing to enable the hospitals and medicines to treat the patient and trace all the patient's situation. And also, this COVID-19, like in education, will accelerate the digital transformation in healthcare system and medical innovation. So telemedicine usually is not very popular among doctors and many organizations in many countries, but through this COVID-19 pandemic, many countries will, I guess, many governments will try to introduce the telemedicine in their country. I'm sure it'll accelerate great in many countries. In sum, it's essential to take steps to prevent digital technologies entrenching or widening health inequalities, because this pandemic is likely to widen the gap between the poor and the wealth. It will create disparities between the poor and wealth. So the government should pay attention to narrowing or widening the gap between the people in terms of healthcare. Healthcare will shift also to prevention-centered system from the treatment-centered system in the post-COVID-19 era. Everybody experienced it. Yeah, we better prepare, we better prevent this pandemic before it happens. So healthcare system should move from treatment care system to prevention care system. That's the whole point. That's the lesson from this pandemic. And telemedicine and virtual health will emerge, whether you like it or not. So it's a natural course of development, I'm sure, after pandemic period. Now, everybody knows the government should change itself. Government should transform itself into the next situations in response to or in preparation for the possible new digital environment. And government should prepare to deal with the legacy of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Korea too, we are trying to prepare for the possible pandemic. And also the Korean government to prepare for the possible changes in society, in education, in industry and everything. And you are supposed to do the same way we do, and all together in the global level. The 5 trends and issues suggested by OECD is as follows. And we must find innovative COVID responses, and also we must break down the boundaries between the government departments. So we call it seamless government.